She'll never use Discord as her primary method of communication.
Well, sounds like she doesn't love you enough. And welcome back to another episode of the Games Gone By podcast. I am your host, Adam Baskell, as always. And joining me today, a very special guest, along with a mainstay. So, of course, we have the gaming expert enthusiast, Austin Baskell. Austin, how you doing?
That's me, gaming expert and enthusiast.
And then we have a longtime friend of mine, Jeff Drasher. I don't have a title for you yet, but you are also a gaming expert and enthusiast, but I don't want two of those, so we'll just have to workshop that later. But how you doing, man?
Hey, Adam. Glad to be here. Yeah, we'll workshop the title.
Let's go ahead and get into kind of just our sort of overall impressions of the game. I'll keep it kind of brief. The game, when it is sort of clicking on all cylinders to me, is just incredible. I think I was talking to you guys about the trip up to the Wind Temple. You go up this mountain, and you have to deal with the snowy stuff. And so you kind of have the stamina and the climbing and the weather all interacting there, which is kind of cool. But then once you get to the top of the mountain, you suddenly are in this almost like vertical climb through these it's like there's these bouncy things on top of floating ships that are spinning around this tornado, and you are bouncing from platform to platform, and you have to make use of your glider and your new ability that you got from the wind bro and ascend. And then you get to the temple, and the temple's got a really cool puzzle, and then you get to the boss fight, and it's just this floating like crystal worm who you can attack with melee or ranged. Way more fun to attack with melee because you do this dive bomb from like 40 yards away. It was great. I was honestly like, this game's fucking awesome. But then all the things I don't like about this game kind of picked up immediately after getting down from the Wind Temple. It was like coming out of the bouncy castle and having to walk on solid ground again. It just
literally
sucked.
came back down to earth. Got it.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that the stamina was just often kind of annoying because I didn't find that it really interacted with the things I was doing very often. So, for instance, it didn't come into play that often when I was climbing. I think the rain pissed me off when I was climbing way more than the stamina did. It comes into play when you're gliding, which makes sense because Zelda Tears of the Kingdom has an interesting thing it has to do here where there's a sky island. So the glider can't just regulate itself by being a glider. You have to make sure you can't fly from the sky to anywhere you want, right? Mm-hmm. So it works well there. Once you get a little more stamina, the running is not so bad. On the tutorial island, it was fucking horrible. I mean, it's 2.5 seconds and he's out of breath. I was losing my mind. But once you get off the tutorial island, you like never walk again anyway, so it's fine. I liked the physics stuff a lot. I think it would have been better if I just had something on my screen that said your weapon's not about to break. That probably would have taken up less screen time for me. It just seemed like it was constant. And I'm not about to pretend I had the best weapons around. Like I know you would pick up some that would say, "Oh, extra durable," and I was like, I have no idea how I got that or when I got that, but I wish I had 8 of those right now. So there are things of that nature, but I only ended up getting a solid 20 hours into it. It's a cool game. There's some fun things. I don't think I was willing to put up with the points that frustrated me to keep going. But I think the easiest way to say is like, if you liked the first one, I just see no reason why you wouldn't like this one. But Jeff Drasher does, so we're going to let him get into his overall impressions.
Well, I mean, so that's a strong statement coming out of the gate, right? If you liked Breath of the Wild, you will still love Tears of the Kingdom. You just might very quickly burn yourself out on some of the newer mechanics. And honestly, it also might just be my subjective opinion. One of my favorite things about these two entries in the series are some of the aesthetics, or I just like aesthetics in games in general, and the fusion mechanic in Tears of the Kingdoms did not keep me as engaged as I would have liked over time, because I was constantly taking out weapons, finding things to fuse to the weapons, and they always looked like garish. Like it was a little strange. You know, we were talking about Ocarina of Time and that third person perspective. It was a little weird for the character in front of me. They always look kind of like off, or like he had just dug through the trash to get some like cool stuff to
or the giant hammers that are 6 times his size that just rest on his back.
If they could just scale some of the weapons to look a little bit more like, not, I guess, anime nonsense, which again, it's it is a Japanese title, so we got to give them some leeway there. But if they would just like downplay that a little bit, I think I would have been a lot more engaged in the Tears of the Kingdom combat for a while. And honestly, Adam, I think the greatest tragedy is you having skipped the first title. I think Breath of the Wild gives such a great introduction to all of its mechanics. Starting zones are starting zones. No one likes to repeat starting zones over and over again.
Yeah.
But I think given enough time, like Breath of the Wild holds up much better than, anything from back in the day you could compare it to. I don't know, Austin, what's your take
failed to
between
mention.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, I did mean to mention at the beginning that I hadn't played Breath of the Wild, which was a key point of my perspective here. But yeah, so thanks for bringing that up.
I mean, in its defense, I never stopped you. Like, I was never like, oh no, man, you got to stop right now, because I had the confidence in your years of gaming expertise that things would go smoothly. And apparently, I was wrong. I vastly underestimated how nice it is to have these new mechanics spoon-fed to you, and then it's just a much more enjoyable experience.
Hey, listen, it wasn't hard. It just sucked. You're getting the wrong impression.
I don't mean to suggest that. You're right. It wasn't hard. It's just not fun to not have any idea what's going on.
Okay.
I will say that I've heard the complaint a lot from people that the Tears of the Kingdom opening, like Great Sky Island, is not as strong as the Great Plateau from Breath of the Wild. And I didn't really feel that way when I was playing it, because I think it's because I had all that experience with Breath of the Wild that it all just felt natural to me. But I feel like a lot of people were saying that they didn't like the Great Sky Island, that it was too confusing and a lot of the mechanics weren't introduced very well, kind of like you were saying. Personally, I think Tears of the Kingdom has taken over Breath of the Wild as the better version of this experience. And what makes these games so interesting to me is the emergent moments that happen, the freedom that the game gives you to just explore and look around and stumble upon new things constantly. There's always something happening, even out in the big open fields. Like, you can walk and find some guy holding up a sign that you need to figure out a puzzle to help him keep his sign standing.
Addison, my boy.
We love Addison. Or just, when I was playing Tears of the Kingdom and I accidentally happened to stumble upon the Shrine of Resurrection from Breath of the Wild. It was super cool to go back into that headspace of starting up Breath of the Wild for the first time. You can literally walk up the exact same cliffs and look at the exact same views that Breath of the Wild introduces at the very beginning of it. And it looks a bit different because this world has been changed and altered by the upheaval that kind of starts off this whole game, the kind of story beats. But it still feels like you're in this world, and Tears of the Kingdom gives you all those same feelings that Breath of the Wild did. But I think a lot of the new mechanics and a lot of the new things they introduced were really compelling, even more so than some of the stuff Breath of the Wild had.
Yeah, I can completely get on board with that. Not to shift gears, but I would definitely say that as far as sequels in gaming series in general go, Tears of the Kingdom has to be one of the best examples of producing a quality sequel. Like, if you enjoyed the first title, all those same things are there, and more. It's a little bit like improv. Tears of the Kingdom is yes and to Breath of the Wild. It has all the same stuff and so many more things that I think they implemented just as well and just as an enticing and engaging way as they did before. It just turned out for me that I was kind of very satisfied with Breath of the Wild. I didn't necessarily need as much extra stuff as they put into the game.
So I guess, moving out of our overall impressions, which seems to be, I thought it was good, you guys thought it was great, but maybe you liked the first one better, Drescher.
A little bit.
Okay, fair enough. What is something you guys want to just really just express your love for in this game, right? You guys already know what it is with me. It's the shrine, so we can deal with that later. But is there anything that you guys just really want to...
Austin, I'll let you guess first.
Okay. I mean, I can gush about pretty much everything. There's not a lot that I didn't like, to be honest, about this game. I think the thing that is most exciting for me, though, and it's kind of what I talked about briefly, is just the level of freedom that the game gives you from the very beginning. Yes, you're stuck on the Sky Island, and you have to do those set of 4 shrines or however many it is on that first island, and then you leap off, and just the whole world is open to you, and every part of it, all of Hyrule, all of the depths, everything is immediately available, and nothing is really nothing really scales. Like, you just have to go and figure out what can you do. Like, where can I go? Where do I feel comfortable with only 3 hearts? Like, or 4 hearts now, I guess, once you get off the island. Like, it really just lets you decide your journey and all of the different things that you can engage with in that journey. You know, one of the first things I did was go back to Kakariko Village because I wanted to see what had changed from the first game, because that's kind of the first game kind of guides you to Kakariko pretty early on. This one was just like, yeah, you can go there if you want, whatever. Like, you can never go to that village, and it won't make a difference in the, like, story and overall structure of the game. But it's one of the first things that I wanted to do. And to see, like, all of the ruins and stuff that had fallen from the sky kind of land around the village, and the way people are interacting with that, it's just a whole new world and a whole new experience. And I loved reliving all that stuff from the first game, but also just seeing all the new things that they introduced.
Yeah, that is something I do kind of wish I'd played the first one. It's just you guys keep mentioning these moments where you're like, oh, I recognize that from the first game, and that's kind of cool, even though it's, it's different now. I know there's like the Temple of Time in the middle that's now like a decrepit, decaying piece of crap, right? So things like that would have been cool to be able to enjoy the same way. I think you really nailed it, Austin, with the way the whole world's open to you. I was thinking about how when Skyrim was being marketed, they were really pushing oh man, if you can see it, you can get there, right? Which is like strictly true, but it is often just not even worth getting there. And it's not fun to get there. And the best way to get there is probably to take your horse and glitch it up the side of a mountain. So it's like, yes, true, but why? Whereas in this game, I do feel like the mechanics are at least a lot more interesting than something like Skyrim. So you can see it and you can get there. And you may, even when you get there may not be anything there. But it was probably less arduous than walking up a winding mountain path fighting trolls for 17 minutes. So
there's also just so many ways to get there, right? There's so many options, especially once you get the glider. You get a horse. You can use all of your abilities. You can create Zonai devices to just, like, fly around the map if you want. Like, you can do whatever you want to get there. And so, kind of like you were saying, even if there's nothing super exciting or super compelling there, the journey was probably a lot of fun. At least it was for me.
I do have a bone to pick with how long the wings last in the game, but that can be a whole totally separate discussion. Yeah, so to echo y'all's points, my favorite part by far is just the traversal mechanics in the game. Adam, you mentioned Skyrim, which, it is a little bit of an older title compared to one like Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom came out, but, it's been re-released so many times. Pretty sure there's probably one this year. These Zelda games just such a much better job of making it actually fun to go wherever you wanted, as opposed to where a lot of open world games in the past I feel like have failed me, is that like, oh, I could go over there, but that seems like just not something I want to do. It's going to be hard and deeply unsatisfying and not fun. Whereas with these Zelda games, getting actually just physically moving around the map, I thought was just so easy, very engaging, and very rewarding, even if the chest only contained 5 arrows. So
those arrows are very useful though. And I feel like everything you pick up is useful. Picking up a weapon, like every weapon became immensely valuable because nothing was guaranteed to last for too long. So I didn't mind if my chest was 5 arrows because I knew, okay, I can attach a Gibdo bone or a bomb or something super effective to that arrow that will then kill everything.
No, you're totally right.
So,
I think a huge strength of this game as well is how it has kept me excited to continue picking things up. With every sort of open world, you have to collect all the stuff, crafting type game. Eventually, you'll have too many things, right? You'll feel a little bit overwhelmed. But I'd be hard pressed to come up with something that I just don't pick up anymore. I still want to grab stuff all the time, and I think mechanics like the durability and even the fusion keeps me excited to keep getting drops, even if I see the same items all the time, or even if I'm having to click A lot to pick things up, I'm still engaged and excited to get these things, and excited to come across an enemy camp and be like, ooh, what do they have? Do they have soldiers' broadswords? Do they have a claymore? I've been, there was a talus back there. Maybe I can cut out its heart and fuse it to my new sword that I'm about to get. That's really kept me engaged the whole time.
For me, it was sort of two conflicting feelings, because I definitely get where you're coming from, Austin, about how it makes all of these items valuable because you know they're going to break. But they're also fucking everywhere. And for some reason, like, I just couldn't square these two in my head, so I never wanted to pick anything up, and I never wanted to sort through anything that I picked up. I mean, I'm like you, I would end up picking it up because you just mash the buttons, and if there's an icon on my screen saying mash a button, my god, I'm going to mash it. So I picked up everything. Then I would go look through it, and it's like, well, I know this one soldier horn is decent, so I'm just going to use that for fucking ever. And then, is there really that much of a difference between my, like, 12 attack pole and my 9 attack pole if I'm going to fuse it with a 20 attack horn? So I don't know. And I'm not necessarily saying that makes a lot of sense. I might have benefited greatly from managing it better. It's just I couldn't get myself to do it. It felt very futile.
Yeah, I can definitely empathize with that, and I feel like that's one of the reasons I enjoyed Breath of the Wild a bit more, is because you didn't have to think about that as much. The durability in Tears of the Kingdom is definitely higher, so like your weapons last a bit longer. So in Breath of the Wild, you really have to embrace like, oh, weapons are a consumable. Like, I don't have a sword. I'm not going to run around with this sword for the rest of the game. No, you have a sword for a little while, and your goal is to find something cool to kill and get his cool weapon and make sure you're stocked and ready for, like, the next engagement. It's definitely jarring if you've played most other video games, right? Like, weapons aren't consumables. It's definitely a different take from Nintendo to treat them like that, but I think it was a good decision. And once you let go of your attachment and just get really into picking up weapons all the time and being excited to use your best weapon until it breaks, then you'll have a lot more fun with it. And I feel like it went better in Breath of the Wild than it did in Tears of the Kingdom.
And see, I almost feel a little bit differently, and I think it's because of the weapon fusion. And I know you had brought up some complaints about the weapon fusion and the aesthetics of it, and I can't argue with that. Like, some of the weapons look so incredibly stupid once you fuse something to it. I thought the fusing mechanics were pretty easy to just kind of incorporate into my natural movement. Like, I had a weapon out that wasn't fused, so I killed an enemy and then fused like a silver bokoblin horn to it.
Ooh.
And then now it was like 40 plus damage, and I just run around and kill everything with it until it broke.
Let me ask you a very controversial question. Are you okay, like, picking up a weapon and with it unfused, using it in combat?
Yeah, I do. I will often use it. I will often use an unfused weapon in combat until I kill something that is worth fusing to it.
I think that's where a bit of, like, the subjectiveness of gaming comes in, because that would just, like, drive me nuts. I'm like, oh no, it hasn't been maximized. I haven't used it the optimal number of times. Yes. So that's where I feel like things get dangerous in these sorts of games, right? It depends, I guess, on your personal obsession with min-maxing stuff, right? And I'm one of those who's like, oh no, I can't use this until I have the optimal thing to fuse it to, and I'm going to use it fused the whole time. So,
and that definitely could be a part of that, because I'm not a big like min-max guy. Like, that's not me. And Adam always joke about how I like never respect in Final Fantasy VII Remake. Like, I understand. There's just as long as I am having fun and am feeling like comfortable at the difficulty level, then I'm not really worried about getting the optimal usage out of something. So for me, it was just kind of a natural progression of like, okay, I've killed one or two things with this weapon, and now I've killed a pretty strong thing, so let me fuse something to it. And now I have an even better weapon. Or like, oh, I just killed this stone talus, and now I'll grab my strongest weapon and fuse the heart to it. Like, it was always when I felt like fusing something, I would fuse it, and if I didn't, it wasn't a big deal.
Well, here, let's continue on our gushing trend, right?
Sure.
Another one of my favorite moments related to fusing is like getting one of the Gerudo weapons, right? They have a bonus to fusing with stuff. So you get into the depths, you find an undecayed Gerudo weapon with the attack up bonus. So you're talking about like a base of 30. Go get yourself like one of those boss bokoblin horns, fuse it to that. Suddenly you have a triple digit attack weapon, and you go find the nearest enemy camp, throw down some puff shrooms and see how many things you can one shot with a sneak strike. It's just so much fun. It's so exciting to see like how many enemies can I devastate before this thing shatters.
And I know there's a lot of complaints about the game's combat from different people and different things, but I think every combat encounter, there's different ways to approach it. Like, there's people who want to just bomb spam, like grab your bow and arrow and just blow stuff up. Like, other people like to sneak strike, like you were saying. Other people, it's like, let me just get this giant hammer and come in there and like spin around and whack everything with it. Every combat encounter can be approached differently, and the game, I feel like, really encourages you to come up with different ways to handle these combat encounters.
Yeah, I really totally agree with you. I mean, you could be very cynical with the enemies and be like, oh, all the encounters seem kind of the same, but I honestly think they don't. I think Nintendo did a very good job of taking a handful of simple components. There's just a few enemy types. They have a few different levels. They do a few different things, and mixing and matching them all the time in interesting ways. And that's not even to mention like with the not the expansion, with the sequel, bringing in the entire depths area and the nuance of having gloom enemies that, you know, permanently drain down your hearts. It just makes it so interesting. Every camp you approach, you're like, okay, are there lookouts? What type of enemies are they lookouts? Are they lizards? Or are they bokoblins? Is there a ledge nearby? It's just like, I don't know. I feel like I've seen some people say that the combat or even the encounters can be very repetitive, and I'm like, no, man, you're just not paying attention.
It seems like it's one of those systems where it's as repetitive as you make it, right? So yeah, and I will say I had a little bit of fun with it. I'm trying to think. I don't think I looked up single thing about this game, right? As far as a guide, right? I just wanted to try to figure out everything myself. I asked my sister help on a couple shrines. She definitely had some creative solutions, so that was cool. But it is interesting how, you know, at the end of the day, there's just these little things that's like, if that resonates with you, then you're going to have like this very smooth experience from there on out. And if this thing at the beginning doesn't resonate with you, it kind of just affects everything else. Like, I feel that way about all the menus in this game. I find them very clunky to navigate. That might be because I'm not used to a Nintendo controller. Like, I don't want to turn this into a Switch rant. But this game is an 8 because it's on the fucking Switch. God, I hate this console. But that's
the Pro Controller is fine.
That's the thing, is the Pro Controller is fine. The basically extra game worth of equipment I bought to play this game is fine. But God, what was I just fucking talking about?
We were talking about combat and encounters.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The repetitive nature, right? Yeah. So it seems like it's one of those systems that's about as repetitive as you make it, right? There's a lot of experimentation you can do. You're not necessarily encouraged to do it, but you're not necessarily discouraged to do it. It's like, here are a bunch of tools you could use. Go have your own fun. And I think that works well for some people and just doesn't work well for others. And I will say, I tried to approach the game this way. I didn't look up any guides at any point. Which maybe was even not a great idea, given I didn't play the first one. Maybe I should have looked up a few more things.
Yeah, maybe.
But I was really trying to just, you know, experience and figure out everything on my own. Especially, I was treating it all like one giant shrine, which I loved solving the shrine. So it was just like, what little thing am I not thinking about here? But then I'd get frustrated and just go do another shrine instead of cooking food or climbing a mountain. But it's all good. So it seems like you guys enjoyed the way that the game, I don't know if forces is the right word, but definitely drives you toward by having the fusions, by having the durability, by having the stamina, etc.
Yeah, I definitely think like the durability was the right sort of choice for them, right? Like I don't know, and it's a big departure from previous Zelda titles. I just can't imagine a version of these games that are as much fun if your weapons didn't break as often as they did. I don't know, Austin, what do you think?
I definitely agree with that as far as weapon durability goes. Like, I think these games entirely rely on the weapon durability, and if you didn't have it, the entire structure of the game would have to be changed. You would have to change how loot works. You'd have to change how exploring works. Like, I feel like everything would have to be retooled entirely from the ground up if weapons weren't breaking, because so much of the game's mechanics function around not having this like infinite supply of unbreakable weapons. Like, it feels like everything revolves around that. So I think it's the right call. It's a call that I think I liked a lot back in Breath of the Wild, and I like it even more here when you include weapon fusion and like creating your own combinations of crazy weapons.
Yeah, I think it really fundamentally makes it such a good sandbox game. Like I will say that like this genuinely feels like an actual sandbox in like the literal sense, in that there's a bunch of sand, you got a handful of tools, and you can go make your own fun. And I think one of its strengths is just in how many different ways it can do that. Austin, like you were talking about with the different approaches to combat. And that just happens in a lot of different systems with traversal, with exploration, with even the shrines that Adam enjoyed so much. I think one of the reasons this is such both these games, and even especially Tears of the Kingdom, is such a good game, is because there are just so many different ways that you can make your own fun. You could go through this entire game doing nothing but making incredible Zonai constructions, and it would still be like, 9 out of 10 top tier game of all time.
The internet has shown us that there are people who do that just sit there and create Zonai devices the entire time.
I'm pretty sure there's an entire genre now that's just that. Yeah.
You could spend an afternoon just watching YouTube videos of people building these things. In fact, I think I have already,
some of the craziest devices. And I really do think Adam made a really good point when he talked about it's as repetitive as you make it. And I think that's most of Tears of the Kingdom for me, is like, it is as enjoyable as you choose to make it. Like, and obviously that's not gonna fit for everybody, right? It's not a one size fits all kind of assessment, but what you put into it and how you engage in it is a big factor in how you're going to enjoy it. And some people are going to resonate with certain systems more than others. So how you engage in those systems are going to affect your enjoyment, I think.
Yeah, and I do really want to harp on, though, that just the sheer number of systems, like, I don't think, any game is going to get hundreds of hours out of you without it being fundamentally repetitive somehow, right?
Right.
But I definitely believe Tears of the Kingdom has so many quality systems that, like, when I'm tired of beating up these enemies, I can go get on my horse and ride around some beautiful landscapes. When I'm tired of that, I can go into the wilds and collect these different ingredients for cooking. When I'm tired of that, I can find the giant woman who wants my rupees so that she can upgrade my clothes. Like, there are just so many different things that you have a chance of getting excited about and doing repeatedly until you get tired, and then you can move on to something else within the same game, which I feel like a lot of games have tried to do and have failed, whereas Tears of the Kingdom really pulled it off.
It does remind me of a conversation me and Austin had a few months ago. I was playing through Grand Theft Auto 5, and this man said, Grand Theft Auto 5 reminds me of the Lego game. And I was like, all right, you're going to have to explain that one. But what he said really made a lot of sense. He was like, listen, it's trying to, instead of really having like a focus, it's trying to do 30,000 things. And it's not really succeeding particularly well at any of them. Tears of the Kingdom seems to be doing a ton of things, but it actually seems to be working a lot better, in most people's opinion, right? Like, all of those different systems are, even if they're not interacting, they're just fun to do on their own. Whereas Grand Theft Auto, like, I really love driving and flying things around in that game, and that's it. I don't want to play golf. I don't want to play tennis. I would just play a golf or tennis game instead of a, like, golf program inside of, you know what I mean? Like, the shooting is fine. It's like, you know what I mean? There's a lot of stuff in there. So I was thinking about that while you guys were just talking about this. It's like, it managed to do what that game tries to do a little better, I think.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And maybe it's just because it doesn't split itself in as many directions. So it's still, like, a tad more focused, but still varied.
And I do think all of the mechanics are kind of, like, fundamentally the same in a way. Like, I feel like in, like, Grand Theft Auto or the Lego games, since we're making those comparisons now, those games, like, some of their systems are completely different. Like you were saying, like, you can play tennis, but, like, that has nothing to do
Right.
with anything else that you're doing
Exactly.
in Grand Theft Auto. It's using completely different mechanics, different functionality entirely, whereas pretty much everything in Tears of the Kingdom or in Breath of the Wild feels like it's all pulling from the same central mechanics and the same central concepts, and it's just letting you engage with it in a different way.
Yeah, man, you swing your sword, right? That's how you do so many of these things. You swing your sword, and you probably will find different things happening depending on how you swing your sword. Whether you're trying to sail a boat, like, across the little ocean, whether you're trying to get ingredients, whether you're in combat. I think it's just really beautiful how they took, like, you can go all the way back to the original Zelda game. What did you do? You swung your sword. You run around doing that in Breath of the Wild, and there are just so many more things to do.
They do a good job with those things actually do sort of impact the main game, like you're saying, right? Like, yes, you could go build a Zonai thing in the middle of nowhere and do nothing with it, which is also, a fun thing to do. Or you can go clear out an enemy camp for a particular consumable you're trying to farm, or use it to fly around the depths, right? Going back to the Grand Theft Auto thing, you're just playing tennis. It doesn't get you. You don't get like a tennis gun. You don't get. It doesn't really enter. I think there might be like an achievement, and maybe it gets like one of your skills up, which I don't even want to talk about. Where there's like skills you have to grind in Grand Theft Auto. Not a fan, but yeah, I do feel like even the ones I didn't enjoy, for the most part, it was like I see where they're kind of interacting with the main thrust of the game, and everything kind of does. If you want it to. You could run in the wrong direction and build a stupid thing in the middle of nowhere just to see how many times you can strike chickens with lightning, or you could harvest all of those resources into a killer death robot and actually clear out like an enemy camp, right? So I do like that it allows you to not only be as repetitive and varied as you want, but also as purposeful or useless as you want at the same time.
Is there not tennis in Tears of the Kingdom?
I'm sure someone's made it.
That's I'm trying to sit here and think like so.
There honestly might be somewhere.
Yeah.
Like I don't think I ran across it, but even after 100 hours, there's still so much of this game I haven't seen.
Yeah, I think it just really speaks to like I can entirely imagine Tears of the Kingdom having a tennis minigame that is completely like important and part of the temple, and it would be great. Just to torture the metaphor a little bit more, like it could do that. We can have that inside of that game.
And I think it's a big part of it is all of the like physics mechanics and the kind of physics systems that the game runs on. Like, yes, you're talking about just swinging your sword, but also all the abilities that you have all interact with the world in an interesting way. Inside shrines, outside of shrines, in dungeons, whatever, like all of these tools are very useful. I mean, I know Adam would love to gush about shrines right now.
Well, I was actually just thinking, I'm wondering if part of the reason I liked them so much is because everything I just complained about basically doesn't exist in the shrines, right? Like, you can't climb, your stamina is not a factor, you don't really kill anything, and if you do, they actually provide you and force you to use the weapon anyway, because it's like a combat training one. You get to mess with the physics constantly, it's nothing but physics. So it's like, I almost wonder if the reason I like the shrines is because they're like instances of not Tears of the Kingdom that you can play around with for a few minutes.
Which I think is a strong argument for why it's such a good game, right? Like, you don't like these other components. Look, we have something for you.
It's true. I truly could have, if I think A, I just was more used to the like Nintendo controls and menu, and B, my TV wasn't pissing me off recently, I may have just done every shrine and then put the game down. I was truly enjoying them that much. And the temple...
And like, the crazy thing is that's an option.
Yeah.
Like, you can really do that. Like,
I really just enjoyed how varied the solutions could be. It goes back to what we were just talking about. Yeah, you could do what it obviously wants you to do. Or you could, like, stack everything on top of each other, jump on top, and then grind down the rail instead of building the hook slide, right? There's just always, like, I know I built some things with hot air balloons. That was not what they were trying to get you to build. They were lopsided. They moved very slow. I had to use tons of reverse time, but it worked, right? I was able to keep going with my boneheaded idea and force that square peg into that round hole and make it work, and not just settle for the one thing they obviously wanted you to do. Now, having not played Breath of the Wild, you guys can kind of get more into this. Were these similar to it with just more physics stuff? Or, how would you compare the shrines between the two games?
The shrines? Well, I was going to speak about the powers real quick, and maybe even the shrines too. It's like the powers are similar to Breath of the Wild, but just so much more, and there's more freedom to them. And of course, the build system is entirely new. And I feel like the shrines are kind of the same way. One of the things that I think Nintendo will get a lot of praise for is you can find tons of instances of people taking Breath of the Wild shrines and breaking them through glitchy mechanics. And I swear that was straight up inspiration to their development team. Like, they watched those videos, and they were like, oh, we should put that like in the game.
I think they even said as much, right?
I'm about to say, I think they've actually gone on record and said part of their inspiration was just seeing people break the game constantly.
Oh, well, I mean, I love that. So the thing I was going to say is, like, basically the Shrines and Tears of the Kingdom feel like Breath of the Wild, but with even more freedom and just so much more. What do you think, Austin?
I would 100% agree with that. I think Breath of the Wild introduced the concept of shrines, obviously, to Zelda, like these like small mini contained puzzles. And I think they were received really well, but I do think at a certain point the Breath of the Wild shrines like felt almost a little repetitive, and I don't think that was ever the case for me in a Tears of the Kingdom shrine. Like every one I went into, I was like, all right, this is some like crazy physics nonsense that I'm gonna have to figure out. And half the time I was beating my head against the wall because I couldn't figure out what it wanted me to do. And Kai Gadam was saying I would just create some crazy contraption to get me through it, even though I could clearly tell that's not what it wanted me to do. But it was still fun. It's still engaging. And I really do think that Tears of the Kingdom shrines, on the whole, I think are better than Breath of the Wild shrines.
Yeah, I can definitely believe that. I mean, I don't think I've even played enough of them. I honestly... Does anyone know how many shrines are in the game?
I
200?
think when I read the number, it was like 159, maybe.
I don't think I've even done a third of them yet. But yeah, I certainly ran into shrines in Breath of the Wild that were like not fun, even in the first like 10 shrines. And Tears of the Kingdom, I have definitely not felt like that once. But I'm so busy doing everything else, I haven't even gotten to most of them.
So this kind of reminds me, my girlfriend used to do like Twitch streaming, and there was this one time where she's like frustrated with this puzzle. It's some game I've never played. And she's like, I can't figure this out. And I go over there, and I figure it out in like 45 seconds, right? And she's like, how did you do that? I'm like, listen, Rebecca, there's only 17 video games, and across those, there's only 4 puzzles, okay? Like, these are just facts. Like, I've played tons of games, let me tell you, there's only so many. I actually had to think about the puzzle in the puzzles in these games. I wasn't thinking about those 4 puzzles, looking for which of the 4 solutions it was. I actually had to come up with my own. I had to really think about these. These are truly some of the most refreshing video game puzzles I've played in years. You know, there might be some obscure, like, puzzle-centric game out there with some really cool stuff I haven't played. But as far as, like, just being a part of an adventure or action game, just the best I've played in so long. You just actually have to think of something creative instead of let me find the one pixel to click, or let me find which chest I didn't open with the blue gem, etc., right? So I just, I'm gonna let one of you guys take over before this becomes just another hour of shrines, but...
No,
Just shrine gushing.
Yeah. I'm so excited to hear you say that, though, because I feel like the shrines were a little bit of a weakness in Breath of the Wild, partially because the temples in Breath of the Wild just felt much less satisfying. So it's super exciting to hear someone be so excited about the Tears of the Kingdom shrines to just, like, dial in that confirmation that, like, yeah, they did it much better this time, and then... For me, just to bring it back to the Wind Temple we were talking about earlier, I think the run-up to the Wind Temple is like the best video game dungeon I have played in decades.
It is great.
It just, they do such a good job. Like, I wouldn't even call it like a traditional dungeon per se, where you like open in the front door and you got to go find the boss. Like, I didn't realize until I was halfway scaling up those Sky Islands that I'm like, oh, this is the dungeon. Like, this is part of the dungeon, pretty much from the moment you're in Rito Village getting the quest until you're beating your boss. That was the whole temple. And, you know, dear listener, if you think these Zelda games are awful, just go play that sequence. And if you don't like it after that, you don't ever have to play another one again.
I was in full negative mode going into that temple, and I enjoyed the next 3 hours straight. Like, it is just a really good time.
So tell me...
I really do think it's one of the best moments in the game. But I'll let you go, Jeff.
I was going to ask Adam, tell me a bit more. Like, can you get a bit more descriptive about how you killed that boss?
Okay, so basically on the way up, I'm running into this problem where every time I kill something, its weapon like falls off the edge. So I started using a lot of arrows. And so by the time I get to the temple, I have like 3 arrows and like 2 sticks and a wooden spoon, right? My arsenal is bad. So when I go to fight this boss, I realize really quickly, like, I'm not going to have the arrows to shoot it because it kind of exposes its side when it flies around you and you're in the air, and they make such a big emphasis on the bullet time thing right there. So clearly you're supposed to shoot it. But I was like, well, that's literally not an option, so what do I do? So I go to the ground and I'm trying to look for pots to smash. I find like 1 more arrow. This is not going to work. And I was like, well, surely you can beat it without arrows. So let me see what happens if I just like slash. And I was like, oh yeah, well, I'm in the air, so I'm going to do the falling down slash thing. And I'm like, oh my god, I'm moving toward it. Like, oh my god, I'm moving toward it really fast. And then I just had to wait to where, at one point he gets flat, and he opens up the little purple crystal to shoot all these ice things at you. So you fly into it, like, dodging the ice things on the way down, and then you smash through the purple thing. And I'm pretty sure it's just 1 melee hit from anything will kill it, because I had a 2-attack wooden spoon, right? So they're basically like, hey, if you can get to this with your sword, 1 hit is enough. And you'll just smash right through it like you're shattering through glass. Then you go soaring out the other side. You can hear behind you it going, man. And man, it was so much fun. It was the only difficult part. So it wasn't necessarily all that hard, but those tornadoes were a bitch, and I couldn't see them very well all the time. But no, I what a great fight! What a great fight!
No, the tornadoes are definitely difficult, and it's funny to hear you talking about like beating him with melee, because as it turns out, I think that's like, I don't know if they designed it for that, but clearly everyone was like, oh, I got to shoot it with arrows, right? The fight's way easier if you dive through the giant circular holes.
Yeah, because it takes a lot of arrows, right?
Yes, yeah. No, I was sitting there playing it with a ton of arrows, and I'm like, oh god, am I going to run out? What do I do? I'm
and you have to arc
bombs.
You have to shoot it such an arc too.
It's so hard to do, and it turns out using my like pro gamer instincts was a terrible idea. Just throw yourself at him, like, come on, man. It's a much easier fight than I made it be, but it was still so much fun, even doing it in my somewhat ham-fisted way. And even when the camera caused me to lose track of the boat, and I slammed into it at full force and died, that fairy had my back. It was still a lot of fun.
I definitely did that fight with arrows, the way it's intended, I guess. And
I'm questioning it now, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you're right. Maybe it's not. But I did it with arrows, and I had a lot of fun with it. It's one of the best fights in the game, I think, as far as like scale goes, other than maybe the final fight in the game. But I don't want to spoil anything or talk about too much of that. But the final fight has some crazy scale stuff going on. But I kind of wanted to talk about the dungeons as a whole. I know, Adam, I think you only did the Wing
I
Temple.
did, yeah.
Jeff, how many have you done?
I did 4. So the 4 like main questline ones, the phenomena temples.
So how did you feel about them? Because I know a big part of Breath of the Wild's complaint was like, we just have the divine beasts. They're not really any different than anything else in the game. I felt like all of these temples felt really distinct and like part of the world, but their own very distinct, isolated instance of a dungeon.
Yeah.
Kind of like a traditional Zelda game.
Absolutely. Like, I thought these temples were much better than the divine beasts in Breath of the Wild, which might be Wild's weakest point there. And then, like, on top of that, to call back to what I was saying about the Wind Temple, like from the village all the way to the boss is like one full sequence. They did that 4 times, and they all felt like very different sequences, even with like some different mini games in them, right? I guess we should talk a little bit about the details of that. I wouldn't call those spoilers, but like driving around Death Mountain in like my all-terrain vehicle in the depths.
Yes.
Super fun, okay? Defending the Gerudo Fortress against, Gibdo onslaughts. Top-notch content. The only one that I would say is the weakest is the Zora, in my opinion, but I still think it's better than any of the Divine Beasts.
It's always the Zora, man.
I was about to say, wow, Zelda having a weak water temple? Who would have guessed?
Oh, is that the trope? I thought it was just they were supposed to be hard. I don't know. How'd you feel about the temples, Austin?
No, I think I agree with you, but I do think the Wind Temple is the standout one to me. I don't think any sequence is quite as engaging as that climb up the like vertical pillars and all the bouncy ships. Like, that was super cool, and it really points you in that direction as the first one, I think, to give you that sense of scale and epicness. Like, do this because the game is awesome.
Yeah. It was the one part that it sold the hardest of like, hey, go do this. No, seriously.
Right, yeah. It's like, you don't have to, but it really wants you to.
Did the other dungeons have a similar like lead up to the temple proper like the Wind Temple did?
They definitely do. I don't think any of them are quite as compelling, in my opinion. But like the Fire Temple, you have to like scale Death Mountain on like a cart, and then like when you get to the top, you have to take the like some of the wings and like fly around and attack this giant like volcano monster. And
basically you get in an aircraft, and then like a Highway to the Danger Zone starts playing, right? And you're like flying around
basically
Death Mountain, full on Top Gunning it with the boss as like a little mini boss fight. It's great.
Yeah, there are some really cool stuff. I think Jeff hit a very good point where the Zora Temple doesn't have a ton, like the Water Temple doesn't have a ton of great build up. Like, it's not horrible, but there's just nothing about it that like particularly stands out.
Unless you loved Super Mario Sunshine.
Ooh, Yeah, if you're a big fan of Sunshine, you'll love this water
Yes.
temple, I guess.
I see.
It was built for you. It must. I don't know enough about who builds the actual games at Zelda, but I swear to God, whoever directed Super Mario Sunshine built the entire Zora Temple. So
That definitely stands out. I mean, it's really sad because I also think Sidon's like ability is maybe the weakest of the abilities. Like, it's not particularly useful.
So we should talk about the sages for a bit, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's a great lead into the sages.
Yeah, Adam. So this might be tougher for you because you only did the one temple, right? So you have Tulin, I think.
Oh, so the companions, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the little bird, bro.
I don't know if these are spoilers or not. Go play the game, y'all. There are 4 champions that you get to hang out with. But once you've done the temples, you're straight up running around with basically a posse of summon sages with different abilities. That is not something I think I'd ever seen in a Zelda game before. Is that true, Austin?
Yeah, I don't think anything has quite captured that same, like, you have allies with you all the time. I've never played another Zelda game with that experience.
Definitely not the mainline ones, for sure.
Yeah, so like when I got Tulin, I was like, oh, you get to have a companion for forever. And then I knew we'd have to go do more temples, right? And my first,
Of course.
right. My first thought is like, wait, do I get to keep him? Is he gonna stay? And we're just gonna add on more? And then they did, and I was like, this game is amazing. This is the biggest jump forward in Zelda combat that I have ever seen.
And I think it's a really interesting point to bring up the companions in general, because I think one of the big problems with Breath of the Wild as far as the Divine Beasts go and the dungeons go is that because the game is so open and wants you to do everything at once, and like you can engage with any mechanic at any time, there wasn't really that like unique hook for the dungeons like every other Zelda game has, right? You go into the dungeon, you do the puzzles, you find the weapon, and now the rest of the dungeon is how do you use this weapon in interesting ways. Breath of the Wild couldn't do that because the entire game was built around using everything all the time. So I think this game does a really interesting thing by making the dungeons center around your companion and gives your companion a unique ability.
Oh.
And by doing that, it kind of brings back that feeling of like, okay, this is something unique for this dungeon. And to be able to take that out into the world after you're done kind of brings back that same feeling of, oh, I got the hook shot in the forest temple, and now I can use that hook shot throughout the rest of the game.
I don't think I had really realized that, but that is a great point, Austin. That is entirely what those sages are meant to do, is to stand in for like, oh, you got the cool item and, you know, the fire temple. Well, actually, this time you got the cool companion who can blow stuff up, or you got the cool companion who flies everywhere, you know. Adam, does Tulin feel like a replacement for a cool bow?
Tulin was pretty awesome, right? So on the way up, I was telling you I was struggling with weapons and stuff, not having any. There came a point where if I was forced to, I probably would have fashioned something, but instead I could just solve the puzzles while Tulin just killed everything. So that's kind of how I did that whole dungeon. But yeah, I enjoyed having him a lot. I thought he has both, he aids in combat, which is cool. You don't, like we were saying, I can't remember another Zelda like that. And then he has the ability that makes you fly further, which is just like exactly what you were dying for at that point in the game. So I loved having that. I only played probably about an hour after I beat the temple, but it was just constantly like, get off cooldown, bro. I need your zooms. Like, I liked it. I enjoyed it.
So, as an aside to the sages, Austin, how did you feel about some of the voice acting with the different sages?
It's, it's fine. It's about what I would expect from a Zelda game. Like, I don't think anyone's particularly horrendous, but no one particularly stands out as like, yes, this is a great example of video game voice acting.
No, it's like, it's cool that it's there, right? But it didn't have to be there. I was totally on board with it. But the funniest thing to me is I could not understand the Goron companion. They so when you're running around with them as real people while you're doing the temples, they're voiced, and then when you have their avatars later, they're not voiced. Thank God. But
could you imagine just like people yelling at you the entire? You'd have like 5 voices.
Yes. I mean,
the whole game.
Admittedly, that sounds very funny, so I kind of want to see that. But yeah, no, it would have been chaos. The Goron guy, he says, I forget what he says every time he jumps on the front of your Zonai contraption. Adam, you didn't even get to do it. Anyway, you get to launch a Goron from your Zonai contraptions later. It's super fun. But I thought
he's like a rocket.
Yeah. I kept thought he's saying, "Why'd you do it?" instead of like, "I can do it." I think he says, "I can do it." And I can only yes. So that's all I heard over and over again right before I shot him across the map and into an enemy to explode. Right. So.
That makes it infinitely more fun.
He's responding to what you're doing to him. Like, what?
Yeah.
He's like, "How dare you? Why are you throwing me around like this, you monster?"
I was seriously shook for a moment. I was like, "Oh my god, are you okay?" Like, and it turns out it's just kind of a muddled voice line, but that's that great emergent gameplay I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it is. How did you feel about the story as a whole? I know you've played kind of a lot of it. I know the game doesn't have a very defined story, right? But there are bits of story in there. I know Adam probably skipped every cutscene as he does.
I did.
But I'm sure you watched at least most of it, Jeff. So how did you kind of feel about the direction of the story and how it compared to Breath of the Wild?
It's definitely more engaging than Breath of the Wild. I think I'm not even sure if I could tell you exactly the details of the story. Like Breath of the Wild, it's like the battle happened 100 years ago. The sages are kind of still there. You got to collect them and go fight Ganon. Blah blah blah. Tears of the Kingdom is somewhat the same, but more exciting. I think. I don't know. I think it might not necessarily have a better, more engaging story, but because your companions are around a lot more often, I feel like I'm just more aware of them and more aware of where it came from, as opposed to with the Divine Beasts, it's like you do the temple and then you don't think about them again until the final sequence, right?
Yeah, I definitely don't think, Tears of the Kingdom story isn't something that we're going to write home about and be like, this is the next Mass Effect or Last of Us. Like, it's obviously not high art as far as storytelling goes, but I do think there's some interesting moments, and I did all of the dragon tears that you can find on all the glyphs. I did all those. I got all the cutscenes.
I did that first. That was the first quest I did, was to go get all of those. So I've had enough time to process. How did you feel about somewhat of the reveals there?
I thought they were pretty cool. I thought it was interesting. I know you haven't beaten the game yet, correct? You haven't finished the final quest.
That's right. I've done.
I have, and some of those reveals kind of come back in a cool way. So I think it is a cool story, and there's some neat reveals and some neat context to how we get to where we are at this point in the timeline. Again, nothing to write home about, but it's interesting. I think at least more so than Breath of the Wild.
That's good to hear, because I don't know, we could have a whole conversation about video game stories, and I am very much just let's not get hyped about anything. All right, this seems like it could go somewhere interesting, but let's just assume it doesn't. So I'm excited to see how it turns out.
Yeah, I mean, I know Adam hates all video game stories too.
All right, relax. Just the Japanese ones, but. I'll say this. Most Zelda games don't really have a whole lot going on as far as the main through plot, right? I mean, it usually boils down to bad man is back and he take princess and you need 7 things. But they've always been so good at the little stories in the world, right? And I don't think this game is an exception. One of the moments that really stood out to me in my short time playing it was when you're on the way to the Rito Temple. There's a village on the other side of this ravine before you get into the snowy area, and there's a guy in the inn. And I would talk to a lot of the NPCs because the dialogue and the expressiveness of their facial expressions is so good that I was kind of what you said earlier, Jeff, it could have been fine without the voice acting. I don't know why they bothered, because they've always been so good without it. This is just one of those games that doesn't need it. But anyway, I digress. Talk to a guy in the inn, and they're like, "Hey, are you heading up that mountain? Because there's this huge blizzard that just won't stop. And in fact, that bird person outside, you should talk to them." And you go talk to the bird person, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I flew down here to get food because there's a blizzard and we're all starving. I hope to see you up there. We could really use your help, hero of Hyrule." Then you get there, and he's in a cave, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm not moving, man. I got food here. I got to figure out a way to get it to my people." And it's just this continuity that goes all the way through, and it's nothing big, but it's just enough to feel like you're in a world that someone cared about when they were building it. And that it isn't just, we have 70 sections of the map and 70 different people who are working on them, so none of them connect, Skyrim. So
Yeah.
I do like how that kind of, and I only, talked to a handful of people. I didn't play the game all that long, and I still ran into this over and over. A guy being like, hey, the next town over that way, they're always sending goods over here. You might run into some people along the way, and then you run into like a traveling salesman along the way. Just a lot of really cool stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most interesting parts about that is that none of the text feels useless. Like, even most of the stuff that's flavor text will usually have some sort of interesting, like, mechanic explanation or, like, a quest line that may not even get put on your, like, quest log, but is like, hey, you can do this thing, and it's, like, kind of a quest. We're not going to document it, but, like, you might get a cool weapon out of it, or, like, I remember walking around and people talking about, like, this, like, big white horse, like, this, like, majestic white horse in this, like, kind of waterfall area, and I was like, oh, I want to go find that thing. Like, I want a cool horse. So, like, I never ended up on a quest line or anything, but I followed what these people were telling me and found this horse, and then I had a cool horse that I could register that, like, never ran out of stamina, and it was great.
And what I will say with the Skyrim comparison, or just other open world RPG style games in general, I feel like all the quests here both, like, add a bit of flavor to the world, and you don't see the exact same thing anywhere. It's like, it's very easy to build a game, and then the game makes you feel like all you did was 30,000 different fetch quests, or 30 different go kill the monster 10 times for whatever flavor of the week NPC. And I
like 90% of open world.
Yeah. Honestly, let's just be straight about it. It feels like the entire rest of the industry is like 4 quests or 4 puzzles, like Adam mentioned earlier, where I feel like Tears of the Kingdom did a great job having a variety of quests that all have different hooks, different resolutions, and don't drag themselves out, right? Like, they add exactly what they need to the world, and then you move on from them, and it's fun. It's an enjoyable experience that you don't feel like you're replaying the same day over and over again.
There is a quest on the way up to the Wind Temple, which, yes, I'm sorry, that's where all my anecdotes come from, but...
That's fine.
I kind of mentioned it. There's the guy who's like, oh, can you get me these mushrooms in this cave? I can't get to them. It isn't just you walk into a cave, you get 6 mushrooms, and you hand it back to the guy. They're across a thing of frozen water. That's why you can't get to them. And there's no, zone ice stuff, which is usually how you've done that up to this point in the game, but there is some ice flowers outside, and you can take them and throw them at the water, and it creates a thing of ice that you can jump across. And by doing that, you can go get all the mushrooms and bring them back in. So it isn't just like a fetch quest for the sake of just a little reward. It actually forces you to, oh my god, interact with the game world to solve the quest, and you learn something from it. And that's just a totally optional side quest. And I didn't run into a ton of side quests in this game, but all the ones I did were pretty much exactly like that. They did not feel like filler.
You're right. You felt like you were actually helping someone who, like, wasn't just being a moron, but, like, legitimately needed your help, and you feel like a little bit of a hero. So you both have, like, the small-time heroic actions, and the big-time ones when you're murdering a giant monster with a spoon. So
I mean, how many quest givers just feel like lazy assholes because they're like, yeah, I could kill those 3 wolves right there, but you're 5 feet closer, so why don't you do it? Like, right. These people actually seem to have problems, and they seem desperate. There's a girl, and this is why I never got my own horse. Is because the one I caught, there was this girl in the village, and she was like, oh, please, like, my cart broke down, and I'm just trying to get back home or to the next village, whatever it was. I need a horse, and God, I would just give all of my life savings to anyone who could fix my wagon and get a horse. Like, that was pretty cool. That was way more compelling than a little thing that just popped up and said, go get a horse, right?
Yeah, and she actually gives you a decent amount of money, so...
Yeah, I think it was like 50, which is a lot at that start. And maybe that scales, I don't know, but... there's some cool side stuff for sure.
Yeah, I feel like some of the quests here actually wasn't disappointed in the rewards a lot. Sometimes, because, like, I really want some armor sets, right? And, like, sometimes they just gave me a bunch of money instead of some more armor sets.
Right.
But I'd be hard-pressed to think of a time when I was like, oh, actually, you just wasted 30 minutes of gameplay. It was either very smooth, quick sailing, and it was fine, or it was, like, genuinely fun and engaging. Like, here's another minor spoiler. You could definitely save someone from, like, an actual shipwreck at some point by following, like, this message in a bottle they had sent out. It's little things like that, and these are just the minor side quests. Austin, do you have a side quest that you love the most?
I think some of the bigger ones are really interesting, like the Yiga clan, kind of their whole arc. is really cool. That like while we're talking about like little side quests, right? There's also a lot of big like side adventures. I think they're actually listed separately in the quest log too. It's like you have these big adventures that you can partake in, and I think for me a lot of the cool side content came in that. Like there's an entire temple that you don't even really get a quest line for unless you stumble upon it. Like the spirit temple is entirely optional, even beyond what the rest of the game is optional. But it's a really cool, like you have to build like a giant mech and stuff. Like there's a lot of really interesting things that just happen and emerge in the game. I think the Spirit Temple and the Yiga clan are two of the standouts, both in the depths largely, which I think is a testament to how big the depths are and how much there is to do down there.
So here's another question for you, since you played Breath of the Wild. Does the sequel feel like enough of an add-on and an overhaul to be like a true sequel, or do you feel like they cheated by having the same game world?
I think if you don't have the Sky Islands and the depths, then like the amount of changes that were made to Hyrule, maybe not quite enough to justify a new game, but when you factor in the depths and how much there is to do down there and all the Sky Islands and how they interact with the rest of the world, like there is plenty of content to go around. And I read something one time that I think really resonated with me, where somebody was talking about how they played like 80 hours of Breath of the Wild and kind of felt like, okay, I've done most of what this game has to offer. And they played 80 hours of Tears of the Kingdom and were like, I can probably still go another 80 hours because I haven't done half of what this game has to offer for me.
Yeah, my playtime certainly reflects that. So
yeah, and I really do think like there is so much to do. There's so many mechanics. Like caves weren't really a thing in Breath of the Wild, and now Hyrule is like littered with caves and wells all over the place that all have unique rewards, often, or at least oftentimes unique rewards. And if not, you can get one of the little bubble gems and bring it to the guy who will give you some crazy mask and shit. Like,
yeah. Oh man. I totally agree with you there. Like, I think this is another example of it being such a good sequel, because like the thing about the sequel is that you want it to be fresh yet familiar, and it did such a good job with the world map. The Sky Islands, the depths, I think are mind-blowing as far as like an amount of content to go add on to. And like you were saying with the caves, even the surface level map that I spent hours on feels totally new to me, and I can't even tell you why. I realize it's been a couple years since Breath of the Wild, but it's still, I've played other sequels with similar time gaps, and I'm like, oh, this is not fun. I've been here before. Meanwhile, like you were saying, we were excited to go back to the Great Plateau and be like, let's go check out the ruins of the Temple of Time. I'm so excited to see what's there now.
Yeah, there's just a lot of moments like that where you kind of see something familiar and you're like, this is now fresh. Like, it's familiar, but it's fresh because the game has changed, or it interacts with the depths in an interesting way, or it interacts with the Sky Island in an interesting way. Like, there's so much new to the game, and there's so many new mechanics that even if some of the map is similar, there's still a lot to do. And I don't know if you noticed, but like the depths are almost like a 1-to-1 parallel to Hyrule.
They are. They're like a mirror.
Yeah, and it's crazy the amount of detail that goes into that. Like every shrine, not every shrine obviously, but most of the shrines have a light route underneath them, or you know, where there's water, there's giant walls and so now, like, you can use your Hyrule map to assess your depths map, and like, okay, this is where I have to go, and this is how I have to find this, and like, that's some incredible amount of detail for something that could have just not existed. Like, the depths didn't even have to exist, and I think you still would have been like, yeah, there's a lot of content here.
Yeah.
But they just put so much love and care into it that it's crazy.
What they pulled off with the depths, I think, is just so impressive. I'm trying not to just throw generic superlatives at it, right? Because it is such a great example
Synergy.
of... Yeah, right. It's not just synergy. It's so much more. it did a great job of taking that feeling of discovery and exploration that I enjoyed so much from Breath of the Wild, and you gave me the same world as Breath of the Wild, but you've added into this whole other tier that is still tied to the surface world, but I'm able to recapture that sense of like exploration and like confusion and a little bit of fear, but like, excitement. It was just such a clever way to build on so much more content, adding the Hyrule depths.
And I really think the depths, they didn't market it a lot. They didn't, or at all, really. I mean, I think it was a surprise for everybody whenever they first discovered the
Certainly
depths,
was for me.
I don't remember them.
Yeah.
I don't think they marketed it at all. It was all about the Sky Islands. And I think, in my opinion, the depths are way more engaging than the Sky Islands. Which, like, are fun, but I think in a way are a little bit of a letdown. I don't think there's quite as much of them or as much to do on them.
They seem like there's just
as
puzzles in the sky, is basically what it amounts to, right?
So my pet theory is that the depths were like the intended sequel, and then at some point someone came up with the Sky Islands as like an extra add-on or something, because it just feels like the depths is so much more like that's the sequel to the game. It's all the stuff underground. It's where like sort of the the big bad stuff, the gloom is coming from, right? It feels like that was really the center of their development efforts, and then some marketing genius was like, yeah, but what if we make it all about the sky and all of the promos? And like they really kept the surprise and the excitement, I think, of the depths away from us, which whoever came up with that as like a marketing ploy should get promoted. So
yeah, I mean it's brilliant because everybody's like, oh, the Sky Islands, but they kept an entire like almost half of the game just hidden from everyone, and that's pretty crazy and risky. But with a game like Zelda, like it's gonna sell, it's gonna do well, so you can kind of take those risks.
It's just also,
and I think it paid off.
It's funny that it's literally hidden as you play the game too. Like such a big aspect of it is running around and getting the light routes and revealing the map, which So, I don't know if you remember, Austin, how long did it take you to get all of the towers in Breath of the Wild?
I feel like it took a while. I do not remember exactly, but I feel like I was doing that for a long time.
Oh, wow. I was the exact opposite. Like, the way I did the tiers in Tears of the Kingdom, the towers in Breath of the Wild, I was like, I can see it. I'm going to run over there, climb up, and reveal that portion of the map. So, like...
you Ubisoft your way through, is what you
the classic Ubisoft path.
Just 100%. And so, what's so great about the depths to me is that I could do that again, but so many more times, because, like, there's way more light routes than there ever were towers, so...
Damn, bro, you might like Spider-Man. Anyway, to stay on topic. So, saying on Breath of the Wild, I didn't have to. I chose to read a lot of reviews for both games before we started this. And one thing, I wish I could remember exactly which one it was, but it stuck with me, is he was like, look, this is Breath of the Wild. This is a deconstructed Zelda game, right? Instead of it being a map where there are 7 interesting points where all of the weapons and enemies and puzzles are gathered around, we have blown those up and we have littered them across the map. Which seemed to work pretty well, although a complaint I saw over and over, even from people who loved the game, was I do kind of miss that traditional Zelda dungeon. I don't need the toy, I don't need the whole region of the map, but I want my 90-minute puzzle adventure fest, right? So I'm thinking that was probably one of the big criticisms that they actually listened to for this new game. And granted, it was really one of the criticisms that people who liked the game had, so it makes sense, right? Why fix what isn't broken?
The thing I always got excited about was finding new pieces of armor in the caves where, Adam, you were talking about coming across random travelers moving between like the stables and stuff. One of the travelers you'll come across is someone who will be like, hey, let me mark these 3 caves on your map. There's a legend of hidden treasure there. Why don't you go check it out? Oh, okay. And sure enough, it's a lead into like, oh, there are clothes, there's armor in the caves. And I kind of haven't stopped exploring them since because I got to get all those fancy armor sets, man.
So that you can just
those armor sets are quite
so
valuable.
That you can just use the same one. But
yeah. So that's we could dial it back a bit and get into some of my gripes about the game. One of the first quests I completed were the Great Fairy quests because I played the first game, so I knew they would upgrade your armor. And they do this good thing where they let you upgrade the standard armor set very quickly with some pretty common monster parts. But unfortunately, once I did that, I felt a little bit too much like a god, and there wasn't really enough of a reason for me to change sets unless I was literally dying from the environment. Austin, did you get more use out of more of the clothes?
I end up switching my armor sets around quite a bit because I feel like their specific uses are nice.
Definitely.
Like I usually have the climbing armor on because it helps me climb better, and that that is a pain point I think for a lot of people is climbing. I like the climbing in the game in general, but having a piece of clothing that speeds that up for you is definitely not a bad thing. But then when I get into a combat situation, I'll usually put on like my soldier armor or the fierce deity armor because has attack up or a higher defense. Like I didn't do a ton of the Great Fairy quests. Like that wasn't something that I beeline towards. So a lot of my armor sets are still at their base value.
Oh man.
So switching them around for me, it makes sense because I don't have one that's like super strong.
That is an interesting take to hear, especially from someone who beat the game. Wait. So what?
Yeah.
Well, what armor did you wear into the final boss fight?
I just had my soldier the soldier greaves on
With like a total like armor value of like 12 or 20.
I went in with like I think 15 or 16 total armor.
I mean, I'm rolling around with 60 all of the time, just like strolling into Bokoblin camps, like fucking come at me.
I guess more than one way to skin a cat. I guess. Like,
I was about to say, I think that's part of what makes Tears and Breath of the Wild, but both of these games so interesting is the different approaches. Like,
was there something particular you were doing, or is it just that easy to not get hit for you? Like, did you not need that armor?
I mean, I just made a lot of food and just ate food.
Oh my god!
To replenish hearts.
It just like blows my mind the way you play this game, but that's
you can definitely break the space-time continuum a little bit and eat like
solar system's worth of food each fight, so
I mean, yeah, I just had a different approach, I guess.
Well, every time I opened a menu, I wanted to quit playing, so that was a large part of why I just avoided food and tried to just. I think
I just don't know.
I healed more from respawning than I did in food in 20 hours. Like, not even.
I mean, so Adam, that's definitely crazy to me because, like, I absolutely hate dying, right? And this game is this fun thing where it marks with an X where you last died. Like, it's constantly taunting me. Like, remember that? Do you remember that? And I'm like, not cool. So I'll do anything to avoid that.
There's a lot of checkpoints.
They do. So it is definitely a very forgiving game, and so it does blow my mind though that you're like, yeah, I mostly heal from respawning, and I'm like, man, I would have rage quit. I would just like, I'm here to not die.
Well, he did.
So. That's true. That's true.
Just
that's
for
true.
Different reasons. But.
Maybe if you had been more willing to shove food in Link's mouth more often.
They don't like I'm fundamentally against a menu or an inventory system that gives you unlimited anything. I just think it at that point it's like, what are we even doing here? And they don't give you a very good way to navigate through it, I feel like. Now granted, it does, after you play around with it a while, it's more obvious what you actually need. Like something I didn't realize for the longest time is that 80% of the shit that appears when you hit the up arrow, you don't want to put on your bow. You can just shoot a flower to someone if you want, but it does nothing.
I think it adds one attack power, maybe.
Yeah, you're right. Everything will add one attack power. So in my mind, it's like, all right, that just get out of my way. Like, can I sort by more than 2 attack power? You can sort by most attack power, right? And that does kind of put your attack items toward one side, so it's not the worst. But then it doesn't even tell you like what they do. So my thought is, okay, am I just not supposed to care about the special effects, or do they not actually have that many special effects? But I'm never going to learn what does what, so I'm just going to take my highest damage goblin dick and stick it on the end of my wooden spoon and call it a day.
No, I definitely, I would definitely gripe about the menus if I thought it was like a real point of friction to keep you from playing in the game. I definitely believe they did like the bare minimum in sort of UI design, and shockingly, Adam, these menus are actually friendlier than in Breath of the Wild, in my opinion. in my opinion anyway, but it's just like there are so many things to do that I find so engaging and exciting that I'm just really willing to completely overlook it. It's like, this is tedious, but we keep it simple because ultimately it's a game for kids, right? So we can't have too many button combinations, maybe. I'm not sure, Austin. How do you feel?
I know where Adam is coming from on these complaints. Like, I understand it, but to me, it just all felt pretty natural, and maybe that was because I played Breath of the Wild and I got used to it after 100 hours of Breath of the Wild. That like It's like, okay, yeah, this is very similar to how Breath of the Wild works. I just click these buttons, do this thing, and it's done. It never really took me out of the experience. I never felt like I was spending more time in menus than I was playing the game, which there are definitely games where I have felt that way, where I'm like, oh my god, why am I in so many menus? Why am I having to do so much inventory management? I never really felt that with Tears of the Kingdom. Like, I went into the menu to do a specific task, I did the task, and I got out of the menu. And it never felt like it was clunky or overwhelming to me.
They do make a little bit more sense if you'd played Breath of the Wild, Adam. I think one of the things that's confusing is like when you have the bow equipped, what is it? It's like the left and right D-pad don't do exactly the same stuff. If you go back and play the first game, you couldn't fuse stuff to arrows, so it was like left D-pad was the arrow you had equipped, and the right D-pad was your bow. And the reason it seems nonsensical in Tears of the Kingdom is because they kept it consistent to the last game.
No, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. But I definitely it's definitely got to be one of those like subjective points, right? Like this didn't come anywhere close to my like threshold of like your interface is so bad I'm not going to play your game. But I could certainly see how it would do so for other people, because at the end of the day, you got to go into some menu in order to fuse an item, no matter what, and fusing is huge in this game. So,
what have we not talked about yet? The durability, we've talked about that. I think what's interesting is the different experiences we had, right? Because you guys were saying like, yeah, the durability really like made me want to go explore these caves, and I was like, the durability is what convinced me there was no fucking reason for me to go explore that cave, like because anything that cave can do for me, I can just do here already. Which is a little silly to say, because ultimately, like in some aspect, you're playing an adventure game. Like you should kind of want to explore just to go explore, right? So it isn't as if like every nook and cranny needs a like material incentive. I just felt, and maybe if I had come across some of the puzzles out of a different story, I think they should have given you auto build much earlier in the game. And I say this because I think the one energy bar that you start with is already pretty limiting as far as letting you do anything too cheesy. And at the end of the day, I don't know that it would let you do a whole lot you couldn't do from a Sky Island anyway, at least early in the game. Sure, once you get 7 batteries. But I would have liked to be able to play around with that. But I kind of looked at how you unlock that, and I was like, I'm not going to do all that shit to unlock it.
It's not all that hard to unlock, but you're right in the sense of like it's kind of out of the way. Like it's not as pushed on you as much as like the Wind Temple, right? And I certainly didn't get auto build until after I did the first temple. I guess I'm not 100% sure if you can even do it before.
The quest doesn't actually unlock until you beat your first temple. I was reading that, yeah.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I could definitely agree with that. That auto build should have showed up much earlier. And, I might not even have realized that it was something I should get. I feel like the only reason I did is because I saw so many TikToks that were like shoving stuff together. I was like, oh, that's how you make giant mechs, because I'm not about to rebuild all these contraptions, from scratch every time. No matter how you look at it, I think it is tedious to build stuff.
Yeah.
And
it is, for sure.
Yeah, it would just really help them if they had given you auto build earlier, so at least you have some hope that it becomes less tedious. And I had like no idea that like, oh, I wouldn't have to build this air bike from scratch every time.
For me, auto build was never quite as useful as it was like built out to be. Like, oh man, you're gonna love auto build because it lets you build all the crazy stuff that you built. And I was like, well, I never really built crazy stuff, so it doesn't really help me as much as it helped other people.
Yeah, for me, it was kind of tedious to even get my favorites favorited right, because it only saves exactly how the thing currently is, and then like being the min-max where I am, like whenever I try and pull it out and it's like, oh no, this is going to cost like 60 zonai. I was like, okay, well, let me go into my menus. Let me dump out the items I do have. How do I minimize this? It just became tedious quickly.
I agree with that. Auto build is cool, but I think it could have been tweaked a little bit to be a little bit more useful.
I would have loved to just be able to rebuild what I built in some of those shrines, to be honest, especially some of the ones that deal with the hot air balloons, because there were so many times where I was like, there's just nothing around me to build anything with, but holy fuck would I love to just zoom up to the top of this mountain instead of, climbing it. But
well, so if we want to stick on grapes for a minute, I think
sure.
The biggest criticism I would have of Tears of the Kingdom, and Breath of the Wild had this a little bit, is that it's just a bit overwhelming with the number of things you can do and collect. It's like, how many different forms of currencies are there? There's like Poes and rupees and the bubble gems.
You're not going to get all the Korok seeds?
Oh my god. So that
Ooh, yeah. Holy Lord.
Right, so that's so bad it's a meme, and I feel like that was the one instance of that in Breath of the Wild. Like everything else, I felt like, oh, there's a chance I might complete all of this. Tears of the Kingdom dialed it up to 11, and now I'm like, oh, there's like 12 different things I will never complete, like the armor sets.
But yes, there's a lot of things, but I do think they all work pretty well together. Like I compare it almost to like a Persona, which if you know me, you know I love Persona, and I think a lot of the mechanics in those games work really well together. Like, everything you do kind of feeds into some other part of the game. So every time you're doing something, no matter what it is, it has some value to you. If you're collecting Korok seeds, now you're going to have more inventory space. If you're just, hunting down Zonite forever, now you're going to have more energy wells. Like, everything kind of works together. So yes, there is a lot of it, but it all kind of gets you to the same point of, like, I just want to make Link that much stronger, that much cooler, that much better in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, you want a lore-accurate hero, right? No, I get you. I'm like real excited about the armor sets, but I'm like staring at how many different hats I have, and I'm still missing the boots, and I'm just like, this is never going to happen, man. Austin, where is the climbing headgear?
I do not remember.
Yeah,
I cannot tell you.
You were,
but I have it. I do have it.
Yeah.
Don't know where it was at.
You're excited about having that armor set, and I'm like, man, I'd probably wear it too if I could find it. So,
yeah, I definitely have a lot of like ones and twos. Like, okay, I have 2 of this thing. I have no idea where the third one is, but one of these days, maybe I'll come across it.
But the last good thing I'll say is that I do love that there are armor sets that like harken back to all the earlier games, and even some other equipment that does. I love that type of Easter egg, and I can't wait to fully upgrade the Hero of Time gear.
Yes.
My sister has sent me a lot of pictures of her outfits and the way you can turn into like Link from the Game Boy game and all those other things.
You can have 7 different shades of green, man. Mix and match.
Yeah, there's so many different callbacks that I don't remember in Breath of the Wild. I don't remember if they had anything like that. Maybe it was like to a smaller degree. Mm-hmm. But I remember climbing around the depths, and I found a certain boomerang. I forgot what it was exactly called, but it's like the Wind Waker boomerang.
Yeah, it's like
it's exactly the same design, like
the Salt Breeze boomerang or something. It's yeah,
and it's like that's super cool. I have not used that boomerang once because I don't want to break it, but like it's cool that it's there. It's cool that I just stumbled upon. I'm like, oh, like it's not even that strong. I think it's like 16 power or whatever, and I could fuse something to it, but I don't want to ruin the aesthetic.
Right, so, exactly. So that's what I'm talking about. That's some of the cons, but I do love that boomerang. It's great for killing Keese with. They don't do a lot of durability damage.
Yes, yes, that's a great idea. I do think like kind of to maybe guide towards an end here. I definitely think that the game lets you do whatever you want to do, however you want to do it, and that's where its core strength is at. It's very, very open. It's very, very free. You decide how you want to play it, and it sounds like we all had very different experiences in the same exact game, more than any other game that I can really think of off the bat, of like how drastically different all of our experiences were in the same exact game.
Absolutely, which is why it is one of the greatest open world games of all time.
There is something to be said about the fact that I don't feel like everyone has. Everyone I talked to and played Skyrim, what's the first thing you do? Oh, well, I went into Whiterun and I looked at the werewolf questline, right? It's just everyone's first.
Every single person.
So it is cool that this game doesn't seem to have that same thing. I swear, everyone I talked to, kind of ended up going in a different route from the start. So that's definitely cool. One thing I did want to go back to, and I can always edit this before you said we're getting to the end, is we were talking about the traversal, and I was mentioning, no one likes climbing down, right? But I was thinking, because remember, Jeff, you and I were talking about, what is it called? Not Jedi Survivor, but the first one. Fallen Order.
Fallen Order, yeah.
So that is a game where, like, I did enjoy a lot of the level design, except one of the things that I remember most about it is just, like, an absolute shitload of backtracking. Does this ring a bell to you two guys? Does this sound right?
I mean,
oh yeah, definitely.
I did not play.
It's a big Metroidvania style game.
And granted, it's not quite the same style, right? It isn't a pure open world. It is very much like a non-linear level-based game, right? But it's just the way this game gives you so many tools to just not have to do the boring parts of what you've already done. So you never have to retread anything unless you want to. You absolutely can, right? You can go farm the same bandit camp 30 times if you want. But the way there's the fast travel locations at the shrine, I mean, it really just allows you to, like, if I never want to come back to this part of the map ever again, I don't have to. For any reason, I can teleport around it, I can fly around it, I can just avoid it because what's here anyway. Like, but the good thing is there actually is stuff there too, right? You have your caves, you have your puzzles, you have your camps, you have things to do. But it just doesn't ever felt, even in the time I played, in the small area of the map I explored, I never had that feeling of like, walking down this fucking road again, heading over this hill. It was always like, I'm going to just pick a brand new direction. And I know I'm going to unlock a shrine, so I have that sense of progression, right? There's no, the weapons may break, and you may not get the items from the dungeons like you used to, but it was like every time you did a shrine, you felt like you gained experience points. It was like, there's a new point on the map I've explored. I may have noticed a cave nearby it, a town nearby it, a camp nearby it. So I liked the way that the world itself was almost part of your character progression. Since they took a couple of traditional ways to progress out, they left ways to still get that sense of satisfaction of, hey, after that last 15 minutes, I'm a little bit better than I was, before.
That's definitely something I feel like I experienced every time I booted up the game. Like, no matter how long I played for, I felt like I got something done. Like, I could play for 15 minutes in between, like, lunch and whatever. Like, if I was at work, I'd take a lunch break and play for 15 or 20 minutes, and I would find something to do. I'd get some sense of accomplishment because everywhere you go, there is something to do. Every part of the map has some mechanic to engage with or something to complete. And I really like that about it.
Yeah, I think y'all are just so right about the sense of progression. Like, for a game that doesn't have a lot of meters, there aren't experience points. Like,
right.
You've got hearts and stamina. You really do feel a sense of continually, like, moving along in stuff, no matter what you're doing, which I think a lot of games fail to capture. And, man, I kind of can't believe it took us this long to get to talking about fast travel, because that is just a mechanic this game does so well.
Well, I would say, is there anything special about it compared to other games? Is it just the frequency of the points, or the?
I think it's the fact that it, like, unabashedly is like, yeah, you can teleport whenever you want to wherever you had been before. If you want to do that, just go do that. As opposed to, like, other games will try and, like, be like, oh, there's fast travel, but, like, we don't want you to feel like you're cheating. Yeah. There's no constraints.
I left the Wind Temple to go back to the tutorial to pick up a pair of pants, and then came back to the Wind Temple and was able to just do that in 2 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it never penalizes you for it or makes you feel like you're doing it
right.
wrong. Like, it's like, yeah, it wants you to do
The
that.
penalty would be you can't fast travel and do that. And instead they're just like, why would we do that to you? That's not fun. Like, go get the pants, finish the fight.
Right. Do whatever you need to do. Like, it's fine.
It's just enough of a twist on that, like, Ubisoft trope to stay interesting while, like, also highlighting why. I mean, there's a reason Ubisoft does that in all of their games, right? It's just we've gotten tired of interacting with them in the exact same way every single game, right? So Zelda says, let's take what is functional about that, but just put enough of a spin to make it fun. So instead of you climb up and then the camera spins around and then you jump in a hay basket, it's you get shot out by magic into the sky with your super long extension cord so you can take a picture, and then you're just free to skydive and glide wherever you want to go, and it makes getting to the Sky Islands a lot easier. Even though it is super fun to reverse time a falling block, I prefer to just use the towers.
But again, to the point of what this game does so well, and I sound like a broken record, but, like, there's so many options to get to those Sky Islands that you're just trying to, like, you could reverse block, you could fly up, you could fast travel, you could hit the Sky Towers, like, you could ride a dragon if you were so inclined. Like, there's so many ways to access all the different parts of the game that no one person is going to do it the same way every time.
Yeah, the dragons are, I'm pretty sure they're improved from Breath of the Wild. I don't think you could physically ride them in Breath of the Wild. And then in Tears of the Kingdom, it's, like, important. And I'm like, I love this. Let me get on top of a dragon.
Fucking A, guys. Like,
I thought that's enough of a tease.
making me want to
right?
pick this back up. But
I just love the fact that, like, it's Tears of the Kingdom, but dragons. It's just so good.
I wish there were a way that like we could get Adam a like save file that had all of like his stamina maxed out and like remove all the like the pain points, like get him climbing gear, get him all the stuff, but still have the world open. Because I feel like if we could do that, you'd have a lot more fun.
It sounds like you're volunteering, Austin.
I don't know. I don't even know how that'd be possible. But
the other day we were talking about how all these games now release with like a story mode that kind of minimizes all the mechanics. I need the opposite of that. It's like get rid of all of the walking and talking and just give me like a all-you-can-eat buffet of dungeons and puzzles that I can just walk between. Not walk. I don't want the walking. Just let me teleport.
just like fast travel. You can just fast travel.
Because I would love to do all the dungeons in this game. I just don't know if I'm going to be able to get over getting to them.
You need to get a horse, man. Go get a horse.
I feel like every time I'm on the ground, I'm doing it wrong anyway, and I just like respawn and fly somewhere.
Fair enough.
And that is a way to traverse, but
well, maybe I can just. So I did look up an article how to get auto build, and it's like, okay, so you can just like dive in through this one hole by the Temple of Time. Then if you go straight here, you can do this, and then you just like you can get it right there, even without exploring any other part of the depths. Like you know exactly where to go, and you follow my guide. I might do that, and then just get like. Look up how to build a couple of useful vehicles and then go turn in some Zonite and just have like the ability to travel in a fun way so I can stop complaining about that part at least.
Yeah, let me tell you, you get like 4 or 5 batteries, you build that air bike, you're like, oh, the world is my oyster. I can go.
That's what I want. I don't want a horse. I want a flying Zonite powered horse. So
yes.
And that does make sense. I never, the traveling by foot, traveling on the ground, like never bothered me. I understand the pain, frustration of it, especially with like limited stamina, but I felt like there was always so much to do that like it didn't bother me running around the world because I'd always find something to do and engage with.
Yeah, you were talking about, no matter if you play 15 minutes, you could always accomplish something, right? What would be impressive for me is if the thing I set out to accomplish is what I actually did that time, right? It's just so easy.
Right. Get sidetracked.
Very true.
So easy to get caught up in whatever's right next to you as opposed to like, oh man, I need more Gibdo wings so I can finally upgrade that mask. But yeah.
Maybe the reason I didn't cook is because I never got any hearts, so it's like raw apples and peppers were enough. That was,
yeah, it's not quite as exciting. Although there are ways to, cook food that'll give you dozens of temporary hearts.
I did read about the temporary hearts.
So you don't even need those heart containers, man. Just cook some really good truffles.
Truffles.
Yeah, but say get all those truffles, hearty truffles, all the time.
Find some hearty bass, throw in there too. Mushrooms and fish. You're good to go.
It's one of these things where like. Man, if I could just play it on my computer with an Xbox controller, I would probably have 200 hours in this game, but it's just... Maybe one day, boys.
I guess I just don't see that much of a difference between the Pro Controller and
the buttons are the opposite, dude. They're literally the opposite. Like, what do you mean you don't see a difference? They are fucking backwards.
They're all in the same place, though, man. I don't know. I haven't read a
left is right and right is left
forever.
Adam, you need to buy the GameCube controller. Did you buy the GameCube controller?
No. Okay, you have to understand. I think that is the worst thing to ever be assembled with plastic in
the
history of ever.
It flips the buttons back, though. The buttons will be flipped back.
Oh, shit. Okay. Well, that's worth considering.
Oh my god.
I thought the GameCube controller was weird because it's like they made it for Smash Brothers instead, and I guess other games too, but...
Yeah, and it's the best controller.
Truly,
Smash,
yeah. I mean,
100%.
it is.
I don't know how to play Nintendo games with a different controller. Like they just melt in my hands. So you might as well not be there. Like I don't know where the buttons are. So
I don't like the way every fucking time it said press R, I pressed RZ without fail 100% of the time. I don't know why. It was like the icons look the same, or maybe I'm not used to like. RZ kind of looks like RT in my head, so it's a trigger. I don't know, but it's like...
I mean, I'm like the elitist, right? I'm just like, it's a controller. It's the inferior input format. So like, Austin might have to give you an actual like nuanced, constructive answer.
Hold on, though. You
but
can't tell me that playing this game with mouse and keyboard would be the way to go.
it's just,
That'd be
this is
absolute nightmare.
right, absolutely. Which is why this is the one game that I'm playing with a controller.
Unless,
So.
you know what, if I could just play it with a controller and then when I go to build things, just like switch over to mouse and keyboard, that could be.
Right?
That would be awesome.
Right.
That would be awesome.
I am still impressed that they managed to get me to like glue stuff together in 3 dimensions at all with a controller.
True.
Like that itself is award worthy.
It is clunky for sure, but like I feel like once you get used to it, it becomes second nature, and it's like, okay, I understand how to do this now, and I rarely like make anything that is completely non-functional at this point. Like in the beginning, I was making stuff, and I was like, yeah, I need to tear this whole thing apart because these controls do not work for that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, once you've done some experimentation, you can get the patterns down, and just gluing some rockets to a wing is still a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure.
I was just gonna say, there's
Adam.
definitely something satisfying about the building. I mean, I'm pretty sure the last thing I did before I stopped playing was build a support system for an Addison sign. Right? Like I could not get enough of that guy. That was one of my favorite activities. But it's because it's just so dumb, but it's also just fun. I don't know, because he's like, I have a sign and it's not standing up. I'm like, no shit, you idiot. You're on the side of a hill and it's the most lopsided. It's like you have 2 sides of the sign and they don't even touch. What's going on here?
Did you notice how the puzzles vary in difficulty? Did you notice like why?
What do you mean?
It's like, so the bottom of his signpost, right? It's all these ridiculous signs. They're always attached to one signpost. Mm-hmm. The bottom of his post will have varying levels of like support apparatuses, so that like you have to, it'll fall in different directions. Like
That makes sense.
the easy,
I never noticed
yeah,
that.
the easy to get to ones, they're only missing like one leg. It'll always fall in one direction. If you find him in the middle of nowhere, he has just like this wooden stake that's balancing on a point, and you have to scavenge the woodlands for just enough material to like box the whole thing in, because he is terrible at his job. So,
Or you can bypass all of that and just use the little like floating Zonai device and put it right under the sign.
boo.
And
oh, you're a fucking genius, God.
No, building the entire like scaffolding that was used to construct the Empire State Building was the fun. That was the fun part. Like,
but
Adam's building like a
but
Dyson
again,
sphere around it. Like,
there's just so many approaches to every single puzzle. Though.
there are.
Like the fact that I can say that and you're like, duh, and it's like, yeah, because you wouldn't think to do it, but like you can, because the game. I think you made the perfect comparison when you said it's like improv. Like the game is always like, yeah, and like what next?
Yeah.
Like do whatever you want, however you want.
there's like a way that's intuitive, and then also you can have as much fun as you want, whether that's like using the immovable platforms to make these puzzles a joke, or building a small Death Star for him to lead it on. So
And at the end of the day, all this is possible because the physics system is just so good and so easy to manipulate, or at least easy to manipulate in interesting ways. Maybe not always the way you want it to, but it's kind of surprising to me it has taken us this long to get here, because I feel like we went from Half-Life 2, but was that 2003? Where it's like, dude, the physics in this game are cool. Let's see what someone does with it. And then, there's Gary's mod that spins off of that. But then we go like 12 years to Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, and then another 5 years to Breath of the Wild or something. And that was it. That was like all of the physics games we got, like true AAA productions. There's all kinds of weird indie shit, but I'm always kind of I'm amazed by that, because I feel like there's just so much fun to be had when your brain is like, that is reality, and you can't help but think it's real because you're seeing it fall over like it would actually fall over. And this is just one of the few games to do it. And at the end of the day, like, I have to give mad props for making a whole game based around like a physics system.
right.
So I know that I read some articles right around when the game came out, and there was a lot of game developers that were just like, I don't fundamentally understand.
Like, how did they do this?
Built this game. Like I don't get it. I've been designing games for 20 years, and like nothing about it makes any sense. So I imagine it's really hard to do.
That's exactly what it is. Like, I think to your point, Adam, the reason we don't have more games like this is that it's not easy to do. You have to invest a lot in just the core technology of your engine so that your potato piece of hardware can possibly run this. But
Yeah.
Nintendo did that and put like 6 titles into one video game. So
It's a AAA production that isn't being generated on an 18-month schedule forever. And
Right.
that in and of itself these days is, is somewhat rare. And yeah, no, I think I'm with you. Whether or not you enjoy this game a ton or not, there's just so much to appreciate about what was done here. Like, it's hard not to recommend to someone that you think would be at all interested in any parts of this, right?
I mean, I think if you have a pulse, you should play the game. So
I think you owe it. If you play video games, you owe it to yourself to at least check it out. I mean, if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. But it's one of those. It's one of those things that, like, as much as you don't want to say, "Oh, just because 10 million people bought it means it's good," it's like, well, yeah, but it kind of does. And you know what I mean? Like, there's something to that. Like, you don't have such special taste that you're better than 10 million people. Like, fuck off. Go try it.
This is definitely a game that's going to be talked about, I think, in 10 or 15 years. We're going to be talking about Tears of the Kingdom still. Just like we're talking about Breath of the Wild. Like, I think we're going to be talking about both of these games, maybe as a collective, but they're going to be talked about as, like, some of the greatest games of this generation and potentially some of the greatest games of all time. Like, they will be in that conversation. And, Tears of the Kingdom will definitely be nominated for every Game of the Year award and probably win half of them. Like, this is I think it's an important game in our, like, in this year and in our generation. So, like, you should probably play it.
Well, that about wraps up today's episode, guys. Thank you to everyone for listening. If you'd like to follow us online, you can find us on social media at Games Gone By Radio, or you can always send us an email to gamesgonebyradio@gmail.com. Thanks again for tuning in. Signing off for Games Gone By, I'm Adam Baskell.
I'm Jeff Drasher.
I'm Austin Baskell.
And thank you for joining us on Games Gone By. We'll see you next time.